Yeah, so before I let Matt and Tim come loose on the matchup, just one quick thought concerning Wisconsin's look at USC. So, in scouting USC, what do you see about the Trojans concerning that they've played two high-level opponents out of three games?
Yeah, this was a great weekend for Badger fans to kind of get a look at SC. Badgers were on a bye. We were able to kind of take a really good look at USC against obviously that power Michigan team. One big takeaway from each side of the ball that I would throw out there, not only is Wisconsin not Michigan's defensive line, they're not even close. Wisconsin's had a major struggle getting disruptive plays all season long. So it's going to be a choice of, do they blitz or do they try to sit with four and play coverage? Because Wisconsin's, I don't think, is going to be able to get to Miller Moss with four guys in coverage. So they're in a tough spot there. Offensively, it's interesting. You mentioned Paul Chryst. This is actually, they hired Phil Longo. They wanted to go air raid. Wisconsin this year has actually ran the ball a lot, over 40 carries each game. They're ninth in the country in time of possession. So I think a lot of Badger fans saw the Michigan game and have come away a little optimistic offensively that Wisconsin's going to be able to run the ball, control the clock. They're going to go into with that game plan. And I think we came out of the Michigan game optimistic from an offensive standpoint because of what we saw there.
So, my main question with Wisconsin, I mean, obviously you're still sorting through things with Phil Longo and the transition to that different kind of offense. And yet it's not manifesting fully. But I have to go back to last year because we've seen this at a number of different programs. Like we saw when Paul Johnson left Georgia Tech, would Georgia Tech junk the triple option instantly, go to a completely different offense? And we've seen this at other places as well, like Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. He junked the Mike Leach air raid system in one season instead of kind of allowing for a transition. And it always struck me as odd that why didn't Luke Fickell allow for a 1-year transition period, knowing that you can't instantly remake the roster when you're aiming for such a dramatic stylistic change. And it seems as though Wisconsin is still paying the price for Fickell trying to do things too quickly. Where's the Wisconsin fan base? And also for you and other people who cover this program, is it pretty agreed upon that like these changes were just forced upon the program and the roster too quickly? Or was it reasonable to expect that in the era of NIL and the transfer portal that you can do 1-year remakes, and it's just that Fickell didn't execute the remake as well as he could have? Or just should this have been kind of a more gradual process? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a little hubris sometimes with the transfer portal. There's a little bit of an assumption that you can come in and you can flip things right away. And quite frankly, I think there is some, it comes down to quarterbacks, right? If you can flip it right away if you get the right quarterback. And they brought Phil Longo in, who was at UNC, who had coached Drake May, who has really put real NFL talent into the league and has coached some really high-powered offenses. And they pulled a Tanner Mordecai from SMU. I think they thought they would find the quarterback and it would be smoother. And most Badger fans were pretty on board with that because the last couple of years of the Paul Chryst era, it wasn't the traditional Badgers offense that people had been excited about, right? They had been struggling and they had been they were gearing more towards Iowa than traditional Wisconsin. So I think Badger fans were kind of to the point of, this isn't working. Let's shift into the modern era of football. They just didn't find the right quarterback. Tanner Mordecai wasn't that guy. They brought Tyler Van Dyke in this year from Miami, and then he tore his ACL in the first series against Alabama. Not sure he was trending to be that guy either, to be completely fair, but unfortunately, he's out now. So for the second year in a row, they're not going to have that quarterback. So they've reverted a little bit. This offensive line that's in place is still the offensive line, for the most part, that a Paul Chryst recruited. So it's big, it's nasty, it's physical. And that's why this year, every game, they've run the ball 46 times, 41 times, 42 times. I think internally, they realize who they have to be. They have to be a ground and pound team to win that time of possession game. And that's what they're going to try to do against USC. They're going to try to keep it on the ground and win that time of possession. To a larger point, I don't know if they stylistically made a mistake going too quickly to this new offense. I just don't think they hit on the quarterback.
So USC went up against that pass rush, and you guys lost a powerful defensive lineman in James Thompson Jr. What have you guys done to replace him? And a big part of this is going to be the reason why Michigan, like, we're cracking our offensive line, but our offensive line held up pretty good against LSU for the most part. and were dominant against lesser competition. What have you guys done to replace him, and how successful you think you'll be in replicating what Michigan was able to do?
Not at all. Nothing. To answer your first question, how successful have we been in replacing James Thompson Jr., who was our top defensive lineman, was lost before the season with an upper body injury? We've been not successful. It was already a spot on the team that was very lacking in depth and impact players. And on top of that, then you lose your best guy there. It's the weakness of the team. It's a unit without elite NFL talent. It's a unit without depth. Teams have been able to run the ball against Wisconsin. Wisconsin has not been able to generate a pass rush. And that's what I've told Badger fans who are coming out of the Michigan USC game optimistic for what the Badgers can do offensively, which I think is true. But the Badgers cannot replicate what Michigan did defensively at all. There's nothing they can do that's going to replicate what those dudes on that Michigan defensive line can do. That's an elite defensive line, and Wisconsin's not even a mid-tier Big Ten defensive line. So Moss is going to have time. Or it's either this, Moss is going to have time, or defensive coordinator Mike Tressel is going to have to dial up some exotic blitzes. And Moss has been pretty good against the blitz. Like, he understands where to go with the ball. He sees that coming. I think it puts Wisconsin in a really tough spot. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, if Wisconsin does just try to play conservatively, is Moss going to get a little reckless, maybe try to force something? Is Lincoln Riley going to stay patient? Because I think Wisconsin, and they've done it this year quite a bit, is just, we're not getting to the quarterback. We're going to play cloud coverage and make you nickel and dime it down the field.
Well, I think you saw this is really what Utah State tried to do. I'm not saying your defense is obviously going to be a step up from Utah State, but he has shown patience. Just, he was throwing to McCree over the top, the linebackers, in between the linebackers and the safeties. He's really got that throw down, and you saw USC really able to run. So yeah, if you're gonna go in that class, if you're gonna drop guys, I think USC, whereas they struggled against that Michigan pass rush in pass defense, they actually had some success running to the outside. And I was kind of curious why they did not try to run to the perimeter a little bit more in the game against Michigan. But if you do run that kind of a defense, I think they will be patient. I think they will run the ball, and I think they may be successful doing it.
This is possibly.
Go ahead.
I was just going to throw in, while we were on the subject earlier of the offensive philosophy, that does this holistically work at Wisconsin anyway, regardless of what you try to do with personnel and try to bring players in, based on where you're located in the country? And I know that it's a different day and age with NIL and with the transfer portal, but the high school football recruiting is still the lifeblood, or should be, of any program. I don't see, I want to see the first example of a team that's able to live off of it and succeed, that really is the route to go, and to be a team that's going to play, even though I think weather is completely overrated. I always go against that argument, but if it's a factor anywhere, it's at Wisconsin more than anywhere, practically anywhere in the country, especially that plays at a place that has the expectations. And then, of course, just again, the type of player that's in that region of the country, to be able to transform that to the kind of offense and then compete, seems like a difficult stretch.
Yeah, I think it can. I think it's a valid question, but I think it can work. You hit on the weather thing. Most games in Madison, even if it gets a little cold, the weather's okay. And we've seen teams like Purdue have success throwing around in the Big Ten, going back to some of the quarterbacks and receiver combos they've had. So I think it can work. It's going to be more of a power spread. They're going to want to still run the ball. Longo's always wanted to run the ball. Luke Fickell's always wanted to run the ball. I apologize, my dog snuck downstairs. But yeah, I think it can work. Again, I think it really comes back to, they got to find the quarterback. And up to this point, Longo hasn't been able to do that at Wisconsin. It's only been 2 years. Oh my goodness gracious. But the big answer, I think it can work if they can find the quarterback, but it's got to get better on the edges as well. Wisconsin's not there. You look at USC and the receiving talent. Wisconsin still has some issues there on the boundaries. They don't have an elite boundary receiver. They have a really good slot receiver in Will Pauling that you guys are going to see, but the talent on the edges needs to get better. The quarterback needs to get better. But ultimately, I think it can work. I think Luke Fickell is a sharp coach. He understands what he's trying to do there. And it's still going to be a spread passing game, but it's going to be based around the run. So I think as long as you don't abandon that power run concept in Madison, you can make just about anything else around it work.
All right, now one of the things that we were talking about earlier on the show tonight, Ryan, I don't know if you heard us, but talked about how Michigan really seemed to derive a lot of value from playing Texas, and that really seemed to prepare Michigan well for USC, much more than what USC did against LSU prepared the Trojans for Michigan. Like, Michigan got a lot more value. You played Alabama, so what do you think you learned against Alabama, and do you think that the physical nature of Alabama, but also the speed on the edges, how do you think Alabama's attributes prepare Wisconsin and kind of raise the bar, giving the Badgers a better chance to compete for 60 minutes with USC?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are things you can take out of the Bama game. Now, Bama beat Wisconsin 42-10. So there are limits to what you can take from that, I think. Wisconsin's offensive line actually held up really well against Bama's front. That was probably the best part of that game. Wisconsin opened up some running lanes early in the game when it was still a little bit in doubt. Wisconsin went on a 17-play touchdown march right down the field to make it 28-10 against Alabama, against that #1 defense. They still have the ability to do that, to go on long, tedious marches that just kind of take the heart and soul out of a defense. And if you can do that against Bama, when Bama is still playing in the first half, you can do that against just about anybody in the country. And that's been the Badgers' third or fourth 15-plus play drive this year. One of the reasons they're ninth nationally in time of possession. So they showed even against the team geared up against, and that was against the #2 quarterback. That was after Van Dyke went out. That was with Bama putting 8-9 in the box. So I think they can take that out of it. I think their offense line and their running game can methodically punish just about anyone in the country for periods of the game. Then it just comes down to the passing game. Can you make enough throws to back a USC off? Can you make enough throws when USC starts creeping that 8th guy in the box, or maybe you get something behind the linebackers and make them say, okay, we can't put 8-9 in the box? I think that's the remaining question. Braden Locke will be the quarterback this weekend. He's taking over for Tyler Van Dyke. Had a few starts last year. Smaller quarterback for USC fans that might be interested in who they're going to see. Not an athlete, not a great runner. Mostly he knows the playbook really well, quick decisions, point guard type of quarterback. Distribute the ball, find different receivers. I think you're going to see some RPO action, not with Braden Locke running, but with Braden Locke kind of seeing if they're going to crash down. If so, he's going to hit the slant. It's going to be that type of offense for Wisconsin. But yeah, I think from the Alabama game, you get a sense that the offensive line in this running game can compete at a pretty high level if the other parts of the team are there.
And so who are the playmakers that we should be looking for on the offense? So when we see Wisconsin line up on offense and he's distributing the ball, who's the guy you want the ball in their hands for a majority of the targets or handoffs?
Yeah, it's not a long list, unfortunately for Badger fans. But Will Pauling is a guy that you're absolutely going to see a lot. He's got 29 targets this year for the Badgers. That's the guy who far and away leads the team in targets. He leads the team in catches, had 74 receptions last year. Really explosive player, north and south. Undersized, but tough, physical, will go over the middle, will take a hit, hold onto the ball. And then when he catches it, he embodies that Kyle Shanahan type of mentality, get north-south immediately, north-south quick. So Will Pauling's there, you're going to see a lot of. The running game, you're going to see Ches Malusi, Tyree Walker. It's more of a running back by committee, though. It's not that traditional great Wisconsin running back. You're not going to see a Monte Ball type talent there. More running back by committee. Good backs, not great. Will Pauling's the receiver. Bryson Green, Oklahoma State transfer, is more of our big body guy. You're going to see some of him. And then a young player that Badger fans are still waiting to break out is Trechka Kahuna. I'm curious coming out of the bye week if they're able to get him some looks. Coming into camp, coming into this year, a lot of hype, a lot of buzz. The type of guy we're going to get in space. He's going to be explosive. So I'll see it coming out of bye week. That might be someone to take a look at. But really, it's Will Pauling is the guy to key on, and then it's going to be running back by committee for Wisconsin.
A lot of Trojan fans would probably want to hear from you about CJ Williams, who transferred from USC last year to Wisconsin, a local product. It seems like he's not quite there in the depth chart. What have you seen from him? Maybe in the spring or into the early season?
Yeah, a lot of Badger fans would like to hear about CJ Williams too. He was an incredibly hyped get for Wisconsin. That first year portal guy for Luke Fickell. He's had troubles catching the ball. Unfortunately, he's already had a drop this year that's kind of kept him off the field. He's behind Bryson Green on that boundary spot. He's a guy that Wisconsin had high hopes for. It just physically, he's had trouble separate. I think the physicality in the Big Ten is a little different. People can all talk about how much you want to make of that. I think year one, it was a bit of an adjustment for him. In year two, he's had some troubles catching the ball, unfortunately. Another guy coming over, Tackett Curtis, is another one that's come over from USC. And then obviously this is an Alex Grinch revenge game. So I don't know how much we want to make.
We were going to get there, but we were easing it. I was easing into this thing, but if you want to rip the Band-Aid off, we can go there. But I was going to take this thing easy as we went up the line of the names, but go ahead.
Yeah. So listen, Tackett Curtis, I'll tell you this, and you guys are obviously familiar with Tackett Curtis. That's one of my favorite high school films of all time to watch, right? Coming out of Manny High School, the Badgers were in on that recruitment. He came over in the offseason as well. And the last 2 weeks, he started getting reps. And honestly, he has looked really good. I know there were some issues at USC. There was also some injury issues, battling through some stuff in the offseason. He still was recovering a little bit in the spring. He's starting to come on. You're going to see a role for Tackett Curtis in this game, more so than CJ Williams. He's really been earning reps. And honestly, Wisconsin returned a trio of inside linebackers. Tackett's kind of jumping them. So you're going to see some interesting stuff with him, physical sideline to sideline. He's getting healthy finally, and we're seeing some of those physical traits that we saw in high school. Alex Grinch, I don't know, he's not our DC. He's a safeties coach. So,
right.
I think in terms, I know a lot of Badger fans are curious, what kind of advantage can Grinch give the Badgers this week in game prep? Maybe a little bit. I always think those things are a little overrated. But it probably, I'm sure it doesn't hurt. I'm sure they're asking him a few things, but it's a different quarterback. It's different playmakers on both sides. So I don't think there's a ton there. I'll say our safeties have looked fine, but he's not calling plays for us. So I know that was a sore spot for y'all last year.
So, obviously one really big plot point, not just for this game, but just for the Big Ten in general. And I'm sure you've discussed it plenty at Locked On Badgers in the offseason. But now it really comes into focus with Wisconsin playing USC. And of course, pretty soon we're going to have Oregon playing Ohio State as well. It's that push and pull between the Pac-12 refugees and the old guard in the Big Ten. And what's going to be the push and pull in terms of how the two groups of teams, the two clusters of teams influence and affect each other in terms of their playing style, in terms of their overall approach, in terms of their philosophy. What have been the main talking points that you've been diving into and that you think might be at work in this game with Wisconsin and USC in terms of that Big Ten, traditional Big Ten mentality versus the things that USC is carrying over from the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think some of the talking points I think are a little overblown, but I do think there is an element of, at least from a traditional Big Ten fan, you watch that Michigan USC game, and there is an element of, welcome to the Big Ten. Like, what? He won a game throwing the ball for 32 yards. We've been watching this for 15 years. This is football for us. I'm in Iowa. I watch Iowa every year doing this. So I think Big Ten fans felt vindicated. It's probably the wrong word, but nationally, there's always been kind of that's really ugly football. Like, that's not going to work in other places. So I think nationally, Big Ten fans feel a certain type of way and USC is a powerhouse. USC is an absolute blue blood. I've always said that. Like, y'all coming to the conference raises the profile 100%. So it is kind of nice to see a blue blood coming to the conference and then lose to a team that threw the ball for 32 yards. It feels a little vindicating. It's very similar to us when Nebraska came into the conference. They came in as coming off that Big 12 championship game. They were going to come in and kind of dominate. In that first year, Wisconsin ran for like 5,000 yards on them, right? There is an element of physicality in the Big Ten that I do think is real, and I do think takes a little bit of getting used to. So that element's there. And then the other one I would just talk about is the excitement. I talked to a bunch of Badger fans who are flying out to the Coliseum, people who live out there, Badger alumni in the West Coast. Yeah. And they're just so excited. I mean, even with iffy first three games for the Badgers, like, we get to go see Wisconsin play at USC in the Coliseum. This is incredible. I know that place is going to be sold out. I know it's going to be rocking. So there's just an element of, like, this is why we love college football, to get matchups like Wisconsin, USC. And for Wisconsin, then that's a really cool thing, because USC they are one of the traditional powerhouses. So to have that interconference matchup now, to me, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if any of SC's home games the rest of the year, two of them already are sold out. I would be surprised with the games. outside of probably the Rutgers game, that's got a late Friday night game. That's going to be a hard sell. But the other games, I think, because what you brought up, there are so many Big Ten alumni in Los Angeles, and so that you're going to have a nice mix. It's not going to be like UCLA where it's going to be majority Big Ten, but it will be. You're going to have a full Coliseum, and the better USC plays, it's just the way it is. I've said it for years. USC has about a base of about 50,000 fans that are going to show up. But then when they're winning, that's when you load up on the extra 30, 40,000 fans. Add in, again, a strong fan bases in the Big Ten that have been out here on the West Coast for a long time. They would love to see their Badgers, love to see Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan next year when they come out. There will be packed Coliseums going forward.
And I can't wait to be a part of that. Like, I can't make it this year, but like, I can't wait to come out there for a game. Obviously, you guys can probably buy me a beer or show me a place to get one.
Absolutely. That's a given.
Yes.
Ryan, I hate realignment for the most part. However, because of what has just been mentioned here, this is the part that you love because it's been a bit stale in the Big Ten with basically, hate to say it to you and other people that root for Big Ten Western Division teams. They've been fodder 10 consecutive years in the championship game for the East winner. And so basically people are looking at 3 games a year. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State play each other. What happens there decides the conference. And now, to get all these fresh matchups is just love it. Phenomenal. And we got our first taste of it. And it was glorious last Saturday. Switching back to the football, you mentioned Monte Ball. That's what people think of nationally when they think Wisconsin football. NFL offensive lines that weren't necessarily always the highest recruited guys, but that developed, became just mammoth, just beasts up front, and then the great tailback, or many times a collection of them. You mentioned that Nebraska championship game. Man, they went about 3 deep, that Wisconsin team, in regards to great tailbacks. But I think just as much front seven on defense, and how good Wisconsin's been defensively for years and years and years and years, especially in the front seven. And is it just a coincidence that when Jim Leonard left, it seems like the front seven left with him? What happened to that front seven on defense?
Yeah, that is a great question, because lost in all the running back tradition of Wisconsin is the linebackers, right? It's the Watts, it's the Van Ginkel and TJ Edwards, and I mean there's NFL dudes all over. Leo Chanel for the Chiefs that were Badgers linebackers. Some of it was recruiting, and recruiting was really one of the big downfalls at the end for Paul Chryst. It's one of the reasons, aside from on-field performance getting a little stale, he didn't have a recruiting department for 9 months in an era where teams have 9 people in the recruiting department. They have a GM and a front office guy and a transfer portal guy. Paul Chryst just didn't staff that spot. So recruiting at the end of it really fell off. And then some of it is just you switch coaching staffs. There's a little more turnover there than I think people expected. It takes a little bit longer than I think people hope to get it going again. But I think it's a combination of that recruiting at the end of the Paul Chryst era, and those players would be the juniors and seniors on this team right now, right? Those would be the guys that would be that upperclassman front seven. Those last couple classes with Paul Chryst just didn't pan out. So when Luke Fickell got in here, there was a talent vacuum at the top of this roster. His first couple classes have been pretty good, but they're freshmen. They're redshirt freshmen now. So ideally in a couple years we get back to that, but at this very moment they tried to hit the portal to address it. They brought in 5 linebackers in last year's portal cycle. A little early to tell how that's going to quite hit yet, but it's just right now there's a talent vacuum, and you hit the nail on the head. The Badgers haven't been able to reload in that spot, unfortunately.
Anything else, gentlemen? All right. Everybody, Ryan does an exceptional job, as you can hear. Locked On Badgers is the place to be. Ryan, what do you have going on this week that people want to lock in on?
Just putting a bunch of money on the Badgers plus 14.5. That's really what I'm doing. No, so after the game, as always, we have a live post-game show. Every Friday, we have a live call-in show where people can call in and just kind of what their thoughts on the game are, optimism level, all that stuff. Badger fans are a little frustrated about the start of the year, but Definitely going to be fired up for this one. So watching the game, going live after. Hope it's a great one. I think it will be a pretty good game. I do have USC winning, but I think the Badgers are going to play pretty well behind a pretty good running game. So hopefully a good game, good post-game show. And I'm sure I'll mix some IPAs into that mix.
Ryan, we love when you answer the call. So thanks for being here for us.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks very much, Ryan. We really appreciate it.
Great job, Ryan. Thanks.